Hey boys and girls, Ken Smith, KenSmithFishing.com. Welcome. It is Wednesday morning. This is the off day for the FLW tour guys before the event starts. So they've practiced for the last 3 days. I thought it would be interesting to poll some of them based upon what they've seen in practice as to what they think it's going to take to make the top 30 cuts Saturday. So they fish 2 days, then they cut to the top 30. And then those 30 fish Saturday, then they cut to the top 10 Sunday. So I've polled some guys, and I think you're going to find this interesting. But before we go there, a couple of notes here. So I got an email from Scott Miller, one of my subscribers, and his boys fished using some information off one of my videos, which I love this. They won the Deep East Texas tournament with a 20-pound sack, I believe, this past weekend. Let me give you their names. That would be Drake Miller, age 13, and Hunter O'Brien, age 12. They both fish for Splendora High School. So congratulations, guys, on your big win at Rayburn. They said they were throwing, let me give it to you, half-ounce orange crawl traps. So there you go. Congratulations, guys. By the way, I just talked to, so this is going to be a really interesting tournament. Not just because of the water. The water is over 9 feet high, and you're going to hear about a lot of different ways fish are getting caught. So right now, in general, the outside edge of the grass is around 20 feet deep. So the lake's 9 feet high. Grass was growing out to, I want to say 11 to 15 feet. So that now is, add 9 feet to that. So 20 to 24 feet deep. So you have clay, sand, mud in parts of the lake, and then where there's grass in the lake, you have a grass line. That grass is growing up. When I was down there last, you had tops out of the grass of maybe 10 feet, so you've got 5 to 9 feet of grass on top of that. And then you're going to hear a term this week, if you're not familiar with it, called the inside grass line. So that is where that grass quit growing because it was too shallow this summer. And with 9 feet of water on top of that, most of that is 11 to 14 feet deep. So that's that inside grass line. And then you have sort of a sand line. And in that sand line, in some areas, you had lily pads. So you may hear some talk about some fish getting caught around the pad stems. That's what that is. Then you're going to have, in some areas, you're going to have hay grass then that is greatly submerged under that. Buckbrush, hard timber, bare bank up behind it. Fish are going to get caught across all of that. I've heard reports of fish getting caught all the way on the outside and all the way back in behind the timber. My thoughts are this tournament will be won somewhere in that, I'm going to say 10 to 18 foot range, somewhere around that hydrilla, I think. But I'm not down there, and as you guys saw last weekend, I struggled. So there are also going to be some significant outside influences in this tournament, and I'll give you 2 examples of that. Dickey clipped a floater yesterday and knocked his prop shaft off. So somewhere, I don't know where he was, but somewhere in the lake there's now a prop shaft and a really nice 3-blade Mercury Fury 24-pitch prop in the bottom of the water. He's actually over right now getting a new lower unit. I think he just picked it up, put on his boat this morning. So there will be some mechanical issues that are going to come into play in this tournament, and I'll give you another example of that. If you've listened to the locals, one of the very young locals that not many people know about other than the guys who fish around Rayburn is Dakota Ebar, and I hope, Dakota, I'm pronouncing your name properly. Dakota is at the doctor in Jasper this morning getting medicine. He's sick with the flu. So outside influences are going to come into play in this tournament, but it's going to be real interesting. So I polled the guys. Now I've got a couple of more guys I'm waiting for responses on, so I'll add that to this later this morning before I post it. So I talked to Chris McCall, Matt Reed, Dickie Newberry, Dakota, Randy Despino out of Louisiana, Nick LeBrun, and Nick, I think I'm finally getting your name right, also out of Louisiana, Clark Ream out of Shreveport, but also who guides on Rayburn, and Andrew Upshaw out of Oklahoma, but Andrew just about is down here enough that I would call Rayburn his home. By the way, thanks to my boys in Oklahoma for the shirt, the Muddy Water Mob. I love it. And then I also talked to Brian Branham. So those of you who don't know Brian is Brian is a local at Rayburn. He's guiding on Rayburn, but he's tied in with Bill Lewis and the Rattle Trap people and knows everybody. Brian's also a lure inventor and kind of knows everybody. So I was curious Brian's thoughts on the weights too, because he's talking to a lot of guys. So let me give you the predictions. So the top 30 cut, the low prediction, interestingly, is Dickie Newberry. Dickie thinks 12.5 pounds a day, 25 pounds will make the cut to fish Saturday. So top 30 cut. The high, this doesn't surprise me, is Nick. Nick thinks it's 35.6, so 17.5 pounds a day to make the top 30 cut. I think Dickie's closer to right. So here are the rundown. McCall said 26.5, Matt Reed 27.5, Dakota and Randy Despino both said 28, so 14 pounds a day. I've already said Nick's number. Clark Ream said 27, so 13.5 pounds a day. Upshaw said 27.5. So the average for those 8 guys is 28.14. So they're all thinking something around 14 pounds a day for 2 days will make the cut. Then the top 10 cuts, the low was Despino at 40-ish. The high, once again, was Nick at 48. Now, I'm not saying, I don't think this is a predictor of what these guys are catching. They're looking at sort of the averages. So back again from the top, Chris McCall at 42, Matt's at 44, Dickie's at 42, Dakota's at 42, Randy's at 40, Nick's at 48, Clark's at 46, and Andrew Upshaw's at 47. So the average there is 43.8, almost 43.9. So over 3 days, what is that? 16. Sorry about that. Had some dogs barking. So the average. So that's the average is 43.8, almost 43.9 for these guys for 3 days cut. That's a 14.6 per pound a day they think will get to fish on Sunday. The winning weights, the low, and this surprised me, Chris McCall came in with the low at 64 pounds. The high was Dickie and Nick at 75 pounds. So it's Chris 64, Matt 66.5, Dickie 75, Dakota 72, Despino 70, Nick at 75, Clark at 72, and Andrew at 74. That's a 10-pound spread across those guys. The average is 71 for the 8 guys. That's almost 7. It's right at 17.75 pounds a day, 17.76 a day. I think it's low 70s personally. What's interesting is, so I think the pros probably have some bias on how they're saying that, not just on how they're catching them, but also on probably being a little bit conservative. Brian Branham, a much bigger number. Brian thinks it'll take 35 pounds to make the two-day cut. That's 17 pounds a day for 30 guys. That, Brian, would surprise me, but Brian's talking to some guys probably that I'm not talking to, and maybe even talking to some non-local guys. So that could be some of that thing that if you saw, there was a really good video on Outlaw Outdoors the other day where Corey Rambo and Clinton Stacy talked about their predictions. This may be suggesting that the locals are maybe at a little bit of a disadvantage here. Brian thinks the top 10 cut also quite a bit higher than anybody else thought, in around the 50-pound range, and he had the highest prediction for a winning weight at 76 pounds. I will update these numbers later in the day. The one interesting thing, or a couple of interesting things I've heard from most of these guys that I talk to is, you can go really long periods of time with no bites, but when you get bit, it's bam, 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 bam. The fish are grouped up. Not surprising this time of year. The other thing that I've heard is the big bites are few and far between. So execution, in the past at Rayburn, so for example, when Brandon Palak won down here on the Bassmasters tournament, if you remember, he lost a giant one day and he still won. I don't think the giants are going to bite to the point that you get that opportunity. I think there's going to be some soul-crushing fish losses down here. But one thing that was interesting to me that I think 3 or 4 different of these guys said is they think somebody's going to run away with this tournament. They thought that somebody's going to find a group of those big girls that have moved not necessarily shallow, but have grouped up somewhere, and somebody's going to conserve their fish properly and whack through those. Everybody did think or do believe somebody's going to weigh a stringer in the high 20s or even in the low 30s one day, but they think it's going to be hard to back that up. But if somebody's able to back that up, actually a couple of these guys said it's a real good chance somebody runs away and hides from the field. So when I get these last couple of guys in here, I'll add to this, see if it changes our averages any, because I'm real curious what the sort of non-locals are saying. And I'll get this video posted up this afternoon, and we'll all obviously be looking forward to seeing what happens this weekend. I'm coming down Friday. Hope to get some good footage, interviewing some guys, doing some what's in the boat videos, and also maybe even some on the water footage if the guys don't mind me filming them. So stay tuned. Thanks for tuning in. Thanks for subscribing. Hope you enjoy this video. And I'm sorry I'm doing all that, but I'm going to edit on the back side of this and add a little bit more footage here this afternoon. Thanks, guys. This is too good not to share. So right after I cut the camera off, my phone rang. And I mentioned earlier in the video that outside influences could have an impact on this tournament. And two things. Dickie had just come across the bridge, come across a dam, and they are releasing water. So we may start seeing, I don't know how much, maybe they're just generating, but there's water coming through the dam. But he said, "What's that floating across the water?" And he looked and he looked and he said, "It looks like an upturned, upside down boat." And he said, "No, it may be a building." And then he said, "I can't tell." So he called me back a couple of minutes later, and it's a dumpster. It's a commercial dumpster, a big metal dumpster floating down the lake. That's the kind of stuff that's in the water right now. That's the kind of stuff that could have an impact on this tournament. I know these FLW guys are going to pin their ears back and go everywhere as fast as their boats will take them. Those of us that are going to be down there over the next couple of weeks that aren't in that big a hurry, wear your life jackets, wear your kill switches, don't get in a hurry. You know, I don't know if you know it or not, but they talk about in the ocean, containers are floating around out there and ships hit them all the time. Those things will float just under the water. We're not going to have containers, but we got trees, we got dumpsters, or who knows what's floating around out there. So just be careful, guys. But there's a dumpster somewhere down around the Piney Point out in front of the dam right now, floating in Lake Sam Rayburn. So be careful, guys. Okay, so I've got one of the two guys I was still waiting on, Jim Tutt, my buddy from Longview, Texas. Now, Jim has won on Rayburn, has won I think it was called Stren back then, but sort of a coastal level event. Jim's number for the top 30 cut, so after 2 days, is 28 pounds. That's pretty much dead in line with everybody else. That gives us an average weight for right at 28 pounds across the 9 guys who've given us their numbers. Jim's day 3 number, so top 10 cut, is higher than everybody at 54 pounds. He thinks 18 pounds a day it's going to take to make the cut after 3 days. That's even above the number that Brian Branham gave us. That tells me one thing for sure, and it makes sense as I thought through what Jim said. Although it may only take 30 pounds, 28, 30 pounds to make the top 30 cut, it's going to be a big difference between 30th place and the top 10. Going to be a big disparity of weights. Goes back to something else we talked about earlier. If somebody's going to whack, or probably more than one somebody are going to whack big stringers in one of the first 2 days. So I think that actually makes sense. It's 54 pounds, brings our average up to about 45 across the 9 guys for the 3-day cut. And then he also has, by a small margin, the biggest 3-day winning weight at 77 pounds, which is, again, right at 18 pounds a day. No, that's more than that, actually, for him. Our average, though, is right at 18 pounds a day, what the pros think, to win this tournament for 4 days. Right at 71, just barely under 72 pounds. So I would be curious what all you guys think. So you can post below. And by the way, I am waiting on one more guy. Let me make sure he hasn't responded to me. I'm waiting on Brian Latimer. Brian's going to give me his predictions. I want to get this video up, so I will post in a comment below Brian's predictions, and I'll pin that so it'll stay at the top. So give me your predictions. Share below what you think, top 30 cut for 2 days, top 10 cut for 3 days, and what you think the winning weight's going to be. And again, let's be safe out there. There's a lot of stuff in the water. Somebody told me, I think Clark told me, he saw a picnic bench floating around. So just be careful. There's a lot of stuff in the water, and I did hear also that they're only generating, so they're not letting water out other than for generation purposes. So we may see this water over the Ebenezer Spillway before soon, which probably would cause some problems because to my knowledge it's never been over it before. But going to be a really entertaining tournament. So let's stay tuned and let's see what happens. I think it'll be interesting for all of us. Thanks for subscribing, guys. If you haven't, you can click on my picture here beside me, over there or over here one, and subscribe. And thanks for sharing here on YouTube and also on Facebook as well. I very much appreciate it. We continue to grow, and I'll continue to give you guys content as long as you keep watching.